The violence in America's fourth largest oil supplier, Nigeria, single-handedly caused the price of a barrel of oil to increase by $20. Nigeria's economy is heavily based on oil, as over 80% of their foreign exchange earnings are from petroleum. Nigeria has the ninth largest oil reserves in the world and is known as America's escape valve to its dependence on Middle Eastern oil. Most of the oil is from the southern region known as the Niger Delta. Nigeria is a West African country that does not know what a true democracy is. With a population of almost 150 million, it is the 8th most populous country in the world and the most populous in Africa. Approximately 1 out of every 4 Africans are Nigerian. On April 21, 2007, Nigeria held its presidential elections. Although oil is a resource, it has also been a curse for Nigeria. It has contributed to the corruption of elections because many of the politicians use it to their own benefit rather than use the oil for the good of the country. These elections represent the first time in Nigeria's history that power has changed from one civilian elected leader to another one. Umaru Yar'Adua of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, won the election, but this election has been labeled as a corrupt one.
Allegations of corruption have tainted Saturday's presidential election in Nigeria. Will the people accept the result? And is stability more important?
Until the conflict in the Niger Delta is resolved, oil will deny Nigeria a chance to build a true democracy because it has corrupted the government as shown in the 2007 presidential elections. The 2007 presidential elections are the perfect example of why it will take Nigeria a long time to achieve a stable democracy.
And Saturday's coming presidential elections signals further turmoil. Opposition groups threaten a boycott over ballot box abuse.
Umaru Yar'Adua won the election and took 70% of the votes. A result like this is unheard of in today's world. Many of the polling stations were in fact rigged, most of them in Yar'Adua's favor. Because the PDP is the most supported party in Nigeria, and because Umaru Yar'Adua was handpicked by Olusegun Obasanjo to run for this party, there is widespread belief that the votes were rigged in his favor. A good example of how the Nigerian elections in 2007 were corrupt is that many of the polling stations in several states were overrun by youths with machetes. These acts of violence scared people that were in the process of voting.
Why were these presidential elections so blatantly unfair? It would appear at best flawed, at worst fraudulent.
You are absolutely wrong. The election was not perfect, but there was nothing in that election that was fraudulent. Fraudulent by whom? Who performed the fraud?
I'm talking about stuffed ballot boxes. I'm talking about intimidation.
Yes.
I'm talking about violence. People who weren't even able to get a vote.
How many people are violenced?
But so many people weren't able to vote. Surely that is something that you must regret.
No, of course. I want everybody to vote. But that is logistic problem. Yes. Of course I regret that I will have wanted everybody to vote.
Another instance of corruption in the election involved officials counting the votes at a polling station. The sun set while they were counting, but rather than using artificial light to finish counting the votes, they just stopped the counting. In addition, there was a great deal of violence between supporters of the All-Nigerian People's Party, ANPP, and the PDP. During the Katsina state vote, youth destroyed the ballot boxes because they believed that the ballots in the boxes were fraudulent and being used to give Yar'Adua more votes. Nigeria is located in Western Africa and its most populated city is Lagos. The Niger Delta is found at the southern tip of Nigeria. Nigeria is divided into 3 main sections by the Niger River and the Benue River. The southeastern section is controlled by the Christian Igbo tribe. The northern section is controlled by the Hausa, an Islamic tribe. The western section is controlled by the religiously diverse tribe Yoruba. Nigeria's history starts in 1960 when it was granted independence from England. In the early years of Nigeria, many men had their own ideas of how to lead the nation. The first leader was Nnamdi Azikiwe. In 1966, the first of many military coups began after the military perceived that corruption was occurring in the electoral process. General Johnson Aguiyi Ironsi then assumed power. After another coup, however, Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon became head of state. The multiple coups led to much violence and much persecution of the Igbos, the people of the Niger Delta. This persecution led the Igbos to declare their region to be an independent state known as Biafra. But after only 4 years, Biafra was dismantled by the Nigerian military. The more recent rulers also showed tremendous amounts of corruption. Sani Abacha only ruled Nigeria for 5 years, and he made a lasting impression as a corrupt ruler. He is known to have stolen anywhere from $4 to $10 billion. Abacha usually stole the money through a process of giving contracts to companies, writing checks for more than the product was worth, and then pocketing the difference.
Perhaps none of the Abacha's looting was more cynical than one of their company's contracts to supply vaccines for Nigeria's children. The company was paid $111 million from Nigerian state funds, though the vaccines cost only $23 million. Much of the $88 million profit is still missing.
Another leader who is seen as corrupt is the democratically elected Olusegun Obasanjo of the PDP. In his 1999 inaugural speech, he stated,
"I simply refuse to accept the cynical view that Nigerians prefer chaos to order. I cannot endorse the view that Nigerians are innately corrupt."
Obasanjo didn't live up to his claim, and during his term as president, Nigeria lost $130 billion in unaccounted money through payments made to unregistered companies. Other proof that he was corrupt was the fact that he claimed to have spent $10 billion on electricity, yet most Nigerians live without it. Additionally, Obasanjo proposed an amendment to the constitution that would allow him to serve a third term as president, but Parliament turned it down for fear that Obasanjo was seeking a dictatorship. Finally, Obasanjo was alleged to have parceled out valuable land to his family and his friend Malam Nasir el-Rufai. With Mr. Obasanjo's bill being thrown out, he became the chairman of the PDP. Many political observers believe he intended to continue to control the country from behind the scenes. He forced 10 governors to back out of the presidential election to increase Yar'Adua's chances of becoming elected. Further, Yar'Adua kept 8 of Obasanjo's cabinet members after he became president.
It's claimed that you will, by many of your opponents, that you will try and control the situation behind the scenes with the chairmanship of the PDP, the ruling party. What do you say to that? Are you going to stand back, or are you going to give a lot of advice?
I don't say anything. If anybody thinks that I will run the affairs of Nigeria from the background, that's entirely up to him.
Some people, however, still believe Yar'Adua will choose his own fate.
He differed with his own brother on many occasions and criticized him on many issues, and so I don't expect him to be easily controlled by Obasanjo.
The Niger Delta region in Nigeria has one of the world's most concentrated oil supplies and makes Nigeria one of the world's biggest oil exporters. The second largest wetlands in the world counts for 3% of the world's oil, and it produces 90% of Nigeria's oil. This would make one think that Nigeria is a rich country and that few would live in poverty. However, this is not the case. 70% of the Niger Delta's population lives on less than $1 a day. The Delta region is riddled with militants who have been attacking pipelines and stealing oil tankers. These militants claim that they are so aggressive because they are supporting their own people of the Delta and are opposed to the large companies like Shell. The leader of this fight was Ken Saro-Wiwa. He was a member of the Ogoni people from the Niger Delta. He led a nonviolent campaign against large companies like Shell. He was one of the first members of MOSOP, the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People. This group held many nonviolent movements, like a 300,000-person march, which eventually led Shell to close its operations in the region of the Ogoni people. Sani Abacha, upset over the loss of business, arrested Saro-Wiwa and held him on trial for inciting the murder for 4 elder Nigerians. He was publicly executed later in 1994. All the recent attacks on the Shell installations in the Delta have caused a 10% drop in Nigeria's oil production. This 10% is equivalent to 800,000 barrels a day. Professor George Frinas, a specialist in Nigeria's oil industry, claims that
the Niger Delta is awash with weapons.
Asari and many others are saying today that this is a natural successor to what Ken said, because they tried the non-violent option and no one listened to them. In fact, they were killed. Before they are killed, they should be able to kill somebody. So why should they take the non-violent process?
According to Frinas, the militants acquired the weapons by buying them using the proceeds of kidnapped oil workers. The military conflict in the Niger Delta leads to upwards of 1,500 deaths a year. Militia leader Asari Dokubo is now contesting the government for control of the oil as the leader of the Niger Delta's People Volunteer Force. He is threatening to take the fight to the capital of Abuja, and he claims that the politicians there are the actual thieves. According to Asari, the oil should be given back to the people rather than taken by the government. He has gained support with these views as well. The people of the Niger Delta live in abject poverty, and it is their understanding that Asari will help them, unlike the politicians in the current government. In many cities in the Delta, there is no clean water and no electricity. These cities should be prosperous, but just the opposite is true. In fact, when Professor Freenus brought police officers to a pipeline that was in the process of being hacked, they did absolutely nothing. The conditions in the Delta are very poor, and they don't seem to be getting much better. If Nigerians hope to live in a world without poverty and with a stabilized democracy, the government needs to solve the conflict in the Niger Delta.
We need international mediation. I heard an MP say the other day in a presentation that if the United States, the UK, and the EU together were to collectively do everything they could to stop the flow of money that's being stolen from the Niger Delta and to stop giving visas to all the guys who are stealing it, that within the next 10 years you could have most of the problem solved.
If this is accomplished, Nigeria could end the corruption and build a true democracy.